Great. I propose, if it's okay with you, that if you wouldn't mind, start off, just say a few things about yourself, your background, and then maybe some questions, and then we save the decision about the bill towards the end.
That sounds great.
Great. Okay, I'll get out of the frame so you can see them, and thank you so much.
Hi.
Hi.
My full name is Donna Christensen. I'm a lobbyist. I'm registered as a third House member. I've been a lobbyist for a couple of decades, and I've been working in Olympia for over 30 years. I am a graduate of the University of Washington. I studied political science and there, and then I went to law school at Seattle University. And I have my track in law school was on poverty law. So that's kind of my educational background. I started advocating when I was a high school student. I did two things. Probably, I don't know if this organization still exists or not. Have you ever heard of the Future Homemakers of America?
Yeah.
Nope. It's like, think of it as the future farmers of America and future business leaders of America. There were these organizations that were run out of the OSPI, and they were after-school programs where you could learn leadership skills and organize and decide kind of what kind of issues you wanted to work on. And so when I was a leader in the Future Homemakers of America, we decided to work on teen pregnancy issues. And so I think the first time I came to Olympia was when we were working on trying to reduce teen pregnancies and doing peer-to-peer training. So that was an early start for me in high school. That and levy issues. Have any of you ever worked on a levy? Tried to get a levy passed in your district? So that sometimes a lot of folks will start out there, but that's where I started my advocacy work, and as a teenager, believe it or not. So. And I never really ventured too far from that. As an undergraduate at the University of Washington, we worked on things like tuition rates and getting adequate financial aid for folks and all kinds of steps like that. So I feel like I've been a lifelong advocate. And I've represented a number of organizations in education, healthcare, and human services. So that's my background. Do you have any questions about that?
I have a question.
Yeah, come on up to the front. Go to the front. So she can see you. Introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Avi. I have a question for you.
Okay.
Are lobbyists under a lot of stress, or is there, is the job divided among multiple lobbyists?
It often depends on the issue that you're working on. I have clients that have one issue, and I have clients that have, well, one of them has 30 issues for the session. So there are issues where you're working on your own, and there are issues where you're working in coalition with other organizations, groups, lobbyists that share the same position. And so you strategize together, you talk with legislators together and staff. So you get to do a little bit of both of that. And the stress level, I think that it can vary depending on, again, the issue, but also depending on how you're managing your time and really focusing in on the priorities of what needs to be done at any given moment. So some people handle it better than others, as you could imagine, but we all find ways of dealing with it.
Thank you.
Thank you for asking.
Thanks for breaking the seal, Avi. Who else would like to ask a question? AJ's next.
Hi, I'm AJ. I have a question about when you started. Like, how hard was it when you first started, and how hard is it now?
I think when I first started, I had a lot of good mentors. And so even though there were things that were challenging, I had people that I could go to ask questions and get some advice from, and it helped a lot. Not to say that I didn't make mistakes, I did make mistakes, but But I think the nice thing about working in what's known as the third house, that's the membership organization for lobbyists, is that they're pretty supportive. And I was really young when I started, and so I really tried to work with folks that had been here for a while and had some experience and could guide me in the right direction. I'll tell you, probably the biggest lesson that I learned early on, AJ, was the importance of integrity. And I think all lobbyists really ought to strive to have the best level of integrity that they can. There's nothing worse than having a legislator, a staff person, or another lobbyist tell you something that just isn't a fact. And then you work on that, and then you realize it was all wrong. So it's really important. I think lobbyists, even the word sometimes has negative connotations to it. So for me, it's really important to recognize how important that is and make sure that you're being thorough when you're talking with legislators and staff and your colleagues. So integrity is really the key. And that's one of the first lessons that I learned. I think it is important given what we do in our work as advocates. And I think that having that as your foundation makes everything a little bit easier.
All right.
Great question.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi, my question is, what do you do on a day-to-day basis at your job?
Changes depending on where we are during session. The calendar is set at usually the first couple of days. And what I do first thing in the morning is I go through the bill introduction list to see what has been offered by legislators that I'm unaware of. And sometimes there are things that I need to tell my clients about. So I'll pull off all of the bills that they need to be made aware of and send those off via email to let them know, check this out, let me know how that'll impact you, because it'll guide the direction that we go in once they've had a chance to review it. Then I spend either the majority of the day either meeting with legislators, going to committee meetings, or meeting with staff. And that could involve writing amendments for legislation that's going to be execed out of committee. It could be trying to get some signatures on a bill that I'm trying to get introduced. Sometimes it's about hearing in a public hearing the legislation that I would like to get passed, or I've had somebody come in to testify from one of my clients, and I want to be there and assist them as they go through that process of testifying in front of a committee. At night, I usually try to tackle the email that comes in. That can be a long night, but it just gives me an idea of what other folks have been doing during the course of the day and the types of things we need to work on for the next day. Oh. And we work 60 days straight in a short session, which is this session. We have 105-day sessions in the odd numbered years. And the Constitution mandates that we work Monday through Sunday. And then we don't take holidays off or anything like that. So we work straight through. That doesn't mean that legislators don't adjourn and go home for a weekend, but it does mean that they're technically required to work through that time. So, interesting process.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Hi.
I was just wanted to know, how do you deal with clients having different political views?
I actually let them know that if there's a conflict, that they will either have to find somebody that can represent them because I'm representing the other. So it's not a typical thing that happens, but it does happen every once in a while. And can I give you an example of that? I had a client that was concerned about the use of stem cells in research.
Yeah.
I had a client who was very excited about that. So they were on different, polls. One of them wanted to deal with the disease of diabetes and thought that stem cells would be the answer to helping combat diabetes in the long run. The other thought that it was a moral violation to use stem cells in any kind of research or any kind of healthcare. And so I explained to them, both of sides of them, what the position was that they had taken. And I told them that because I represented both of the organizations, I was not going to be able to represent them on that particular issue. And so they used their internal, either members or internal staff, to do the advocacy work on their own position without using me. So that's one way when you have an issue that's in conflict. When it's a political conflict, so let's say you've got a group of people you're representing that tend to fall on the liberal or the Democratic side, then you've got the conservative Republican side in another group. I pride myself on being able to work on both sides. And one of the things lawyers learn in their training is that regardless of the position, you work as vigorously as you can for that position, because that's your job as their advocate.
Yeah.
So really being able to work with both sides of the legislative arena is an important skill to be able to have, no matter what your personal perspective.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Great question.
Other folks come on up to ask a question. I want to jump in with a question, actually, but somebody else can come and get ready. Hi.
Hi.
I am wondering if, do you work for a lobbying firm and the firm gets hired, or do you own your own company and you find your own clients, or how do you find clients, I guess?
I have my own business, so it's a sole proprietorship, and so have my own company. I've done work with others, but mostly in a subcontract way. I would say that probably most of my clients have come from referrals. So a lot of times if some organization is looking for someone to represent them, they will let other lobbyists know. And so word of mouth is probably how I have been able to put my clients together over the course of years. Sometimes it's a matter of helping out when somebody is in between lobbyists. I did that for a couple of years when the Washington State PTA was looking for a lobbyist. They asked me to come in and fill in so that they could find somebody, do a nationwide search, etc. And I filled in. I thought it was going to be maybe 3 or 4 months, and it turned out to be a couple of years, much to my surprise. And it's a big organization, but it was a worthwhile experience. I'd done a lot of work in K-12 education, so it was a worthwhile experience to do it from the parent perspective. But that's usually the way it happens. There are ways to apply for positions. Sometimes you'll see them listed on Craigslist or listed in LinkedIn, or those are the kinds of places where you will see lobbyist jobs opening up. But you have to be really good about, especially when you work on your own, how many clients you take and your bandwidth to be able to meet all of the needs that they have. So it's an interesting process for deciding who you take and who you don't take, but it's definitely worthwhile.
I promised I'm not going to ask all the questions. I wanted to ask a follow-up though. So in a typical session, how many clients are you working with? Like how many are you able to take on? I'm sure that varies depending on like what their ask is of you, but on average, how many?
I've done lobbying in-house. So I represented Seattle Public Schools, and that was my sole client, to give you an idea. I've had up to 12 clients in one session, and that's a lot. I prefer where I'm at now, which is 6. And that's about a full-time plus job during the session. Because during the interim, between sessions, I spent a lot of time working with the organizations to help them hone their own advocacy skills, and also to learn as much as I possibly can about the issues that they're bringing forward. So for example, one of my clients does work in behavioral health, and mental health is an issue that is very high on the list of priorities for the legislature right now. So I spent a lot of time during this last interim bringing legislators to visit their site. It's the NAVOS Mental Health Organization. It's in Burien and West Seattle, the location. And so these legislators would come in and they would hear about the programs that are being offered, tour the facilities, ask questions about, where the problem areas are, where they might need some more state funding, et cetera. At the same time that the legislators are, I too am learning more about those services that are being offered and able to represent them better by having that as my knowledge base. So it does matter that you have that knowledge. Hi.
Hey, sorry, Sally. My question is, so like, what happens when you don't win an issue? Like, do you try again, or do you just leave it at that?
That's a really good question. I'm a little stubborn, so I'm going to try to come back and do it over and over again. I worked on the simple majority, which is an issue to change the way levies were passed. So you could be more successful if you had a simple majority. Before you had to have a super majority to get those levies passed. That was a 30-year project. Yeah, you just keep coming back and coming back. You hope you have the right lineup with the members of the legislature. But there have also been times when you have an issue that you're not quite sure it's going to make it, but your clients are really keen on getting it done. So you put it out there, you see where people are. And if you find out that the public policy makers aren't going to budge in any way, and the legislature turnover isn't something that's really big, then you really have to wait if you're going to come back to it at all. And at that time, your clients could change, or they could just change their mind and they want to do something different. So it really depends on what the issue is and the legs that it has when it's. That's a great question, though. Fun question to answer.
Thank you.
I am wondering if we have about 12 minutes left. I'm wondering if we should pause on the questions and talk about the possible bills, and then if there's time left over, come back to questions.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. So just remind the students, and you saw the email, I think, right? So the 4 that we had flagged as potentially interesting were the breakfast after the bell, preserving housing options, source of income, the one about net neutrality, House Bill 2284, and the college tuition payment and college savings program. So do you have any insight into which one of those we should hone in on? Or what are your thoughts?
I have a little bit of insight on each of them, and so I'm going to throw the information out there and let's talk a little bit about them. The Breakfast After the Bell program is one that has been in play for several years now, and it's just had a roadblock in leadership in the Senate. Now the leadership has changed in the Senate, so there's possibility that it could actually pass this time around. There are 2 versions of the bill. The one that you chose was Senate Bill 6003, and it is scheduled to have a hearing tomorrow in the Senate Education Committee. The House version of it has been passed out of the House several times, but it's come back to the committee and it has yet to be scheduled. The Breakfast After the Bell program is a great program because it allows students to arrive at school, regardless of time, to eat after the bell without impeding on the work that's being done, the coursework that's being done in class. We think my clients, I have 2 clients that are very interested in seeing this pass, hunger being an issue in this state when it ought not to be. So they're very interested in seeing this bill get passed for that reason. And all the research has been shared with legislators about the importance of not being hungry when you're trying to learn. And also, the sleep patterns of particular teenagers and middle school students, so that there is that opportunity to have breakfast after the bell There needs to be buy-in from the school districts and OSPI, and it seems that they've been pretty supportive. There's been a little bit of pushback originally from some of the school administrators around, whether it would disrupt if somebody was eating and somebody wasn't eating. But I would gather that you would be able to judge whether or not that would bother you rather than us telling you that it bothers you. So I think that feedback from students is going to be really important to get this bill passed this session. Do you have any questions about that particular bill?
No.
The next one is the source of income discrimination bill for housing, Senate Bill 5407. Again, this is a bill that has been in play for a number of years. It's been held up for a couple of reasons. Number one is leadership in the Senate. And the second reason is that the landlords have not been particularly pleased with this bill. They have a powerful lobby in Olympia. But what we have found is a lot of anecdotal information about how tenants have been treated when they're trying to find housing, especially at a time when housing is really difficult to find, and certainly affordable housing is very difficult to find. So if you're struggling in poverty or you have a low wage job, trying to find affordable housing is really difficult. And so being able to use the subsidies that are available to you, whether that's a Section 8 voucher or whether that's TANF or any other dollars that are coming in to provide some extra support, there shouldn't be that discrimination taking place. And unfortunately, we're hearing that a lot of that is happening. So the goal here is to prevent that from happening. It also puts in place a remedy so that there can be a cause of action should a landlord act in that fashion. So that's what this bill will do. It was a good choice. And you probably know more about net neutrality than I do, but I will tell you that as somebody who has learned, better skills at accessing the internet and being able to find things when I need them quickly, the whole idea of having to pay or being blocked or all of those kinds of things really is disconcerting for those of us in our state who have really enjoyed net neutrality since the inception of the internet. So we're in a place right now where the federal government has made this decision, the FCC has made this decision to eliminate net neutrality, and the writers of this particular piece of legislation are attempting to put some borders, Washington state, around net neutrality in our own state and letting the federal government do what it will. How that would work out remains to be seen. There's still some question as to whether the net neutrality repeal is going to hold at the federal level. But in this state, we like to send messages to the federal government when we disagree, and this is one way to do it, and also to perhaps put some protections in place. So that's what this piece of legislation will do. And the final one is the college savings program, the guaranteed education tuition program that's called GET in this state. This bill makes changes to the tuition program. The GET program has been on a little bit of a hold. There was some fiscal issues surrounding it. They just opened it up again last November. And as you know, what happens is that parents buy tuition units through this state investment. And when your child is old enough to go to college, 100 units will pay for an entire year of college. So it's a savings program for parents who are planning ahead for their children when they hit the higher education system. This makes some changes to that. The federal government has in place an investment program for education. It's under the IRS rules. It's called the 529 plan. And so it makes some changes allowing parents to transfer those dollars, parents or guardians, to transfer those dollars into a 529 program. So that's what this legislation does. highly technical, but it's one that could be beneficial in the long run to those who are interested in investing in that different way. Those are the 4 choices.
So, do you think they all have an equal chance of? Do they all have legs? Will they all have the equal chance of becoming law, or does one have a better chance than the others?
I would have to say that the ones that probably have the better chance are the source of income discrimination and breakfast after the bell. And the reason why is that they've been in front of the legislature for a number of years. They've been thoroughly heard, meaning that they've had many opportunities in front of committees to listen to the bill and ask questions and have people testify either through their negative experience or from the landlord's perspective about what it means to them to have a source of income discrimination banned. The Breakfast After the Bell program, thoroughly vetted again because it's been heard so many times, passed out of the House several times. The other 2 are a little less familiar. I think everybody knows what net neutrality is. They haven't had legislation in front of them specifically to repeal the repeal of net neutrality in Washington anyway. And then the higher ed bill is one that has been played around a little bit. This is a new version of a bill that was done last year that did not pass. So it's been vetted a bit, but not thoroughly, not to the extent at least that Breakfast After the Bell and the other has been.
And if we have the opportunity, if the students had the opportunity of trying to impact a bill, would their voice carry more weight in any of these bills more than the other? Like if they had something read into the record or wrote letters or?
I believe that each one of these bills, their voices would be a welcome addition. Okay. I think that particularly, higher ed, you're in high school, so there's that moving ahead. But I think there's something to be said for students talking about net neutrality because it is something that impacts everybody. And the idea of having to pay for it or having blocked access to this wide open net that we have had for so long really matters. And I think the voice of students could really be meaningful. Okay. The other 2 bills, I think Breakfast After the Bell, certainly the idea of the opposition saying that it's disruptive to have somebody eating next to you while you're studying, or listening to whatever.
It might be happening right now. I brought a pizza in today, so it might be happening right now.
Perfect. And also, too, I think with the source of income discrimination, there aren't too many people in our area who aren't aware of how difficult housing is at this point in time. And it's just unconscionable that a landlord would not allow someone to rent because their source of income is not acceptable to them.
Okay. So can we have a discussion tomorrow and then just get back to you about which one we choose?
That's fine, yeah.
Okay.
Do you have any questions about these items?
Yeah, any questions about those or any last question? We've got about a minute left. So anybody want to ask a final question? This is just the first of 5 sessions. So anything else you want to ask today? Huh?
Ask her what her biggest goal is.
You come here and ask her. John has a question. He's going to ask one more.
Too shy. Oh, I love that movie.
Hi, I'm John.
Hi, John.
So I was wondering what your biggest goals of 2018 as a lobbyist would be.
To get done in 60 days.
Yeah.
I think that for me, what's really important is to get some of these bills done that we've been working on for a number of years, and we just haven't had that opportunity because we didn't have the leadership in place that would let them go. Now we have leadership in place that will allow them to move ahead, and I'm hoping that that means we can do some progressive actions on them in this upcoming session.
Okay.
So, yeah. And we're going to have good success together.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
We're going to get some stuff done. Woo! Thank you so much. Thank you very much. All right, talk to you in a couple weeks. Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay.
All right.
All done?
Great.